Okay.
Hey, Kelly.
Hi, Pat.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay, but Zoom's changed its controls around and I'm trying to get all this stuff figured out. So,
Well,
Mhm. Jill's this- Good morning, everybody. I know that it's going to be fairly light this morning, but I will let, just due to a number of conflicts that we have with this meeting time. But we're going to go ahead and let it roll for a couple more minutes before we actually get started.
I think Jerry's supposed to join.
Jerry's on.
He's on.
Yeah. So we'll be right back. Just one moment, please.
Great.
Hey, Tim, as long as I've got you here, can you unmute?
Yep, go ahead, Bob.
We good for the 27th, 9 o'clock?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Unless I'm on a fire assignment somewhere, I'll be around.
You just got to get your priorities together. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I thought Carol Fall and Pat Frost might be interested in this one.
Yeah.
They are here in person.
Ah,
We're here, Arnold,
phew.
with my pile of papers.
Person. Okay, we're at 5 minutes after, according to my clock. And we will go ahead and get this started. Welcome to the May 19th briefing on the North Lake project. This meeting was called by Ben Sundahl and team. I just got from Callan over at the Shasta Lake District the notice that the comment period will be extended, it looked like till June 5th. But as they're mostly involved in this project, I'll go ahead and do just a quick roll call with people that are online, and then I'll toss to Ben and his team. So in the room, my name is Kelly Sheen. I'm the co-facilitator for the Trinity County Collaborative Group and executive director for the Trinity County Resource Conservation District. I'll toss to my left.
Carol Fall, Trinity County Collaborative and Trinity Center Volunteer Fire Department.
Pat Frost, Trinity Center Community Services District.
And that's all we have in the room at this moment. Going up to the big board, I will go with a toss to Bob.
Good morning, Bob Morris, Trinity County Collaborative and SAFE.
Thank you, Bob. Arnold.
Arnold here, collaborative member.
Thank you, Arnold. Tim.
Good morning, everybody. Tim Ritchie, District Fire Management Officer for the Weaverville and Big Bar Ranger districts.
Thank you, Tim. Jerry.
Hi, all. Jerry Cousins, collaborative member.
Thank you, Jerry. Larry.
Larry Glass was SAFE and one of the authors of the white paper, along with Bob and Arnold and Jerry.
Thank you, Larry. Thule.
Julie Pat, Sierra Nevada Conservancy. Sorry, I'm on the road. I'll be on I've got service. Thank you.
Okay. Very good, Thule. Thanks for calling in. Christine.
Christine Jordan, wildlife biologist with the Wairika Field Office of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Good to see you, Christine. Thanks for being here. Looks like we have Devin.
Hi, all. Devin DiJacopo, also at the Wairika Field Office for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Devin. Tom.
Tom Waltz, collaborative member, walking on a trail, enjoying the sunshine.
You're right.
Lucky you. Thanks for joining us, Tom. Okay, and then I'll pass to Ben and his team.
Hey, good morning. Ben Sundahl, District Ranger for the Shasta Lake Ranger District. Really appreciate everybody showing up today, and looking forward to this kind of sort of like open forum / listening session regarding the North Trinity County Community Risk Reduction Project. I'm kind of jealous. I wish I was out hiking or walking a trail at this time in the morning. It's a beautiful morning for that. So I'll turn it over to Callan.
Hi, good morning. I think I've met most of you over the past few years, but I'm Callan Keller. I'm a NEPA planner here on the Shasta Lake District. And the IDT out of this office is the primary group of specialists that have been doing the work on this project. So.
And good morning. I'm Todd Johnson. I'm the wildlife biologist here at Shasta Lake and the wildlife biologist on this project.
All right. Unless I've missed anybody, I think that's everybody on the call currently. So I will go ahead and hand this over to Ben.
Thanks, Kelly. Like I said during introductions, main intent of this is just to get everybody together and just kind of digest the draft EA and kind of keep it as an open forum, a listening session for us. Just so we can kind of get an idea of, your thoughts, feelings, recommendations that we can take notes on and bring it back to the IDT and pass along to some of our supervisor office staff. And it's great to see that the service is on here as well. I really appreciate you guys showing up. We're at a good point with the draft EA. I know the service is working on with Todd Johnson with the BA, so that's good news. I'm not gonna, so we have an hour, and we have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. So, I know you guys would love for me to read word by word the entire EA, but I'm not gonna do that. So, so hopefully some of you have read it and have taken some notes. And, I wish more of the staff was here today, but all of a sudden, late last week, calendars got triple booked for this week, and people started disappearing quickly Monday morning for this meeting. So priorities happen, and but at least thankful we can still hold this call and kind of hear what you guys kind of hear about your thoughts on this draft EA and go from there.
Pat.
So I just wanted to thank you, Ben and Callan, for setting up this meeting, and Kelly, and also for extending the time frame for public comment. That really is helpful.
Yep, you're welcome.
Let's see, Bob, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, just a quick clarification before we start out. Shasta Lake District is doing the environmental prep, but who is implementation? Is it Weaverville or Shasta Lake District?
Weaverville Ranger District will be the implementers.
Thanks. That's been a question.
Yep. So once this is signed, it gets handed off to Weaverville. All right. I guess without reading the entire EA, I'm kind of looking for some feedback. I know Callan's looking for some feedback. We have Tim. Tim's been intimately involved, specifically on the fuel side since his detail time here at Shasta Lake office when this project was first a thought in a few folks' heads, and it kind of just steamrolled from there. So you have Tim, Callan, and Todd here, along with Christine Jordan and Devin with the service. So and you got myself. So if you guys have any comments, thoughts, let us know, and we can chat about it. We'll take some good notes, and we'll go from there. Unless you guys really want me to read the whole report.
Oh, no.
No, so I have questions for Tim at the end, but about the prescribed burn part. But I guess from the collaborative's point of view, I think the main question is, did you try to incorporate our white paper, that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors into the document? There seems to be a discrepancy, and I'm wondering kind of how your thought process worked and how the white paper was incorporated into the EA.
I could talk about that a little bit. So, so when we first started planning the project, I think the white paper at that time was and I'm going to probably get the name wrong, the roadside and fuel break white paper. But then about a year ago that we got the updated one, named Collaborative Guidance for Federal Land Management in Trinity County. And so I know that there was some comments and I think that might have came out right after scoping. But there was some comments at the time about the widths of fuel breaks, especially roadside FMCs is what we call them, but they were a lot narrower in the roadside and ridgetop one, and then I know that was expanded in the more recent white paper. So we've definitely had this updated version of the white paper, and the folks that were developing the prescriptions for this, they felt that it was in line with the new recommendations, and it seemed like a lot of the things that were mentioned in here aligned with the project as far as forest health and prescribed fire. There was even meadow restoration, salvage. So I guess if there's, and it didn't seem like it was very prescriptive. It was more of like desired conditions. So if there are ways that were maybe not in line with that, it would be good to hear, because I think we were taking it as that this project was in line with this newest version of what I believe is what you guys are calling the white paper now. I mean, it's not titled that, but please tell me if that's not the case.
I think that's correct. You have the correct document, Callan.
Okay.
So this is Jerry, and thank you for referencing it and knowing about it. That's great. Do want to make sure that you're aware that the white paper covers the entire landscape. It's not just for habitat or foraging area. So application goes across all those boundaries. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that these are your desired condition, the prescriptions that you guys would like to see done across the forest.
Right.
It didn't
Right.
seem like it didn't seem like it called out certain areas.
Great. Thank you for knowing that.
To Jerry's point, and his reference was that part of the discussion that we had on the April 17th field tour for the Rainier Road and Long Canyon timber harvests areas, there was some level of confusion on the Forest Service staff point. They specifically told us at that time that they thought it only applied to certain habitat types.
Oh,
Yeah, and that was kind of much to many people's
And
consternation.
did not apply to non-owl habitat.
Right. Yes.
I mean, I think most of us folks weren't there at that meeting, so I'm not really sure who made that comment, but
Tara.
Tara did.
Tara. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So I think Jerry's point is that we're just trying to make that clear.
Okay. Yeah.
Larry.
Yeah, so to jump right in, reviewing the document, I would say that to make this line up with the white paper, you need to change your diameter limit back down to about 20 to 24 inches. And you need to leave a lot more trees behind than what you're projecting to do. There won't be enough shade. It will dry the area out too much and make it more prone to wind, and therefore, in my opinion, much more vulnerable to wildfire.
And blow down.
yeah, to clarify, so you're right, we call it the white paper, but it is the strategy for collaborative federal land management. I mean, it says for fuel breaks, to retain the best site appropriate shade producing trees, and provide future canopy coverage. It says to space retain trees to allow for canopy growth, but still provide shade on the forest floor. So the tours that we've taken, like Bowerman Ridge, those had shade that discouraged that brush growth and so forth. In contrast, the prescription that was used for Rainier Road used basal area. I guess one of the concerns is that by shifting to basal area, you're not necessarily prescribing that there be shaded fuel breaks or shade, because you can clump trees using basal area and have just 2 or 3 big trees, or you could have a clump of small trees over in a corner somewhere. So there's not that kind of shade canopy that we were looking for in the pilot project and in this most recent white paper. So am I saying that right, guys?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Tom Waltz. Carol said it really well. The whole impetus, and even though Larry mentioned a diameter 24-inch, he was saying that because our experience has been when we don't specify things, the Forest Service tends to go back to a basal area prescription. And we feel like when we state that we want to leave the best, healthiest trees that will be on the landscape for the longest period of time to produce shade, we're trying to inhibit or reduce brush growth. And we can't do that if we have 40% canopy in a lot of the areas. We all recognize that there's landings and there's openings and stuff, but if your average is only 40%, we don't believe that's enough shade to minimize the growth of brush. So Carol said it really well. We think that there's a better metric, and that is to have healthy, well-spaced trees that are providing lots of shade to the ground.
Is there a preferred metric that the collaborative has?
We never specified a metric because we felt like if you were doing that, spacing healthy trees and providing shade to the ground, you could say a metric of canopy closure or basal area or anything that would get there, but that the harvesting crew and the sale administrators and everybody involved would have that desired condition in mind, that if there's 5 trees in a row that are all 24 inches and they cut them all, that probably won't meet the desired condition that we're looking at. So we didn't specify a metric because we felt the Forest Service has limited ability to use anything other than their standard metrics.
I understand that. And I wish that we had, the forester here to be able to talk about this better than I certainly could. Tim might be able to weigh in more on how the prescription was implemented, but it is true that the prescriptions that we have it's not marking guidelines, so we're not really getting in that much to the spacing and that kind of stuff. It was more driven by what we used, mainly based on habitat, which was the canopy cover in the basal area. So, but Tim, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that about the metrics that we used and the trees, the size of the trees?
I don't. I really was just focusing on the fuels component, so I can't add anything of real value to the development of the harvest prescription.
Yeah.
That's some really good feedback that we can take back to the larger team when we get them all together after this week to provide that feedback to them to have a better look at that. So I think you guys painted the picture really well on what you guys would like to see out there on that landscape. So I really appreciate that.
Jerry.
So the challenge, thanks for recognizing that, Ben, and the challenge has consistently been the merging of the basal area metric and the shade canopy to prevent brush growth and making it more dangerous.
Which
we
is
know
what
that that's a tough one, and as Tom noted, we consciously did not put a metric in the white paper because we felt that would put everybody in some kind of corner, and we were just looking to establish the healthiest shade-producing trees left on the landscape.
Larry.
Yeah, so I also want to get into something we saw on Rainier Road. And since that's part of this project area, I want to focus on something we saw there that it seems to be a trend with the Forest Service across the board, because I'm seeing it now with Six Rivers as well. And that is the expansion in the size of landings and the frequency of landings. And that opens up the forest in a way that is once again, I think detrimental to our desired future condition because it's opening up too much. So in the white paper, we talk about landings being a quarter of an acre. I understand that sometimes there's technical limitations that force the landing to be a little bit bigger than a quarter of an acre, and we're willing to accept that. But what we saw on Rainier Road was landings that were an acre, and they were positioned so they were on either side of the road, so you had almost a 2 acre opening. That was what was left behind, and I think that's diametrically opposed to what we're trying to see as our desired future conditions. So limiting the amount of landings and limiting their size would be a recommendation that I would make. I would rather see skid trails than openings like that. And we'd also rather see you cross a road with the skid trail and then come back and fix the road later than to see these giant openings left behind.
Thanks, Larry. That's good feedback. I know, speaking to Kelly McElroy yesterday and last week, she heard about this conversation about landings as well and informed me on, her thoughts on landings. And she was going to talk to, the other folks in her shop, specifically like Corey Kelly and such, just to make them aware of, how many landings we want out there, the size of the landings, and other options we do have. So I know Kelly McElroy has heard you and is thinking about that, and the rest of the staff has heard that as well. So appreciate the feedback, and hopefully we get it right this time.
Carol.
Thank you for having this meeting, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, just, to follow up on that. So I think, one of the, from a collaborative point of view, there's a disappointment that the, white paper is inconsistent with the EA. And I hope you would go back and look at the language in the white paper for fuel breaks versus what the prescriptions are, the shift from shaded kind of areas to basal area. And also, like Larry just pointed out, there's an inconsistency with the landings because the EA says landings can be up to an acre and they average a half acre versus the white paper saying, they should be much smaller. So again, the EA has a lot bigger latitude for landings than what the white paper had envisioned, if that makes any sense. That's just the kind of inconsistencies.
I appreciate that, Carol.
I have a different question than the white paper discrepancies, which is, I hope you can help me understand. So there's a prescription for outside of owl areas, outside of owl habitat. And it's the same prescription for the area within the LSR as outside the LSR. So I'm trying to understand. So the LSR is supposed to promote that old growth habitat, that's why it's LSR. And so if you have the same prescription for current non-owl areas within the LSR as outside the LSR, how are the owls ever going to have a chance for expanding their habitat or moving around? Aren't you kind of restricting them to exactly where they are now and not allowing them the full breadth of the LSR by having the same prescription outside the LSR as the non-owl habitat within the LSR? Does that make any sense at all?
Well said, Carol.
Do you have any?
Yeah, I think so. We're talking in the FMZs only. So the dispersal and non-habitat in FMZs doesn't have a canopy cover retention level. It's still got the upper diameter level, upper diameter limit, keeping all the 30-inch and above trees. Those areas are, currently not, nesting, roosting, foraging habitat for the owls. A lot of the places are that way because they may not support nesting, roosting, and foraging even in the future. So there's a lot of different situations out there for the habitat. So it's hard to, generalize, but I think by retaining large trees in those areas, that we're not precluding those areas becoming suitable habitat in the future for spotted owls.
But you're not necessarily retaining large trees in those areas because you shifted to basal area. So you might have a bunch of little trees.
Okay. I mean, we've got a 30-inch upper diameter limit for the whole project. So the largest trees are above that diameter limit. So
And the prescription is both for the fuel management zones and the FMZs. So it's 9,000 acres that you're talking about is the same prescription for outside the owl areas, but in the LSR versus outside the LSR. So you've not differentiated for 9,000 acres any difference between what might be potential old growth habitat in the LSRs versus outside the LSRs.
okay. Yeah, I think our prescriptions in the owl habitat are pretty conservative, whether they're in LSR or not. So
it's the LSR that's outside of the owl habitat where you're talking about you can go down to 60 to 80 square foot basal area, square foot per acre. So you can go from essentially the EA says right now that the fuel loads are around 418 square foot per acre. Outside of the owl habitat areas, but within the LSR, you can go down to 60 to 80. That's an 80 to 85% reduction in basal area. So how can you do that and still say you're headed towards old growth? That's my question. I don't get that.
Okay.
Can you kind of cure that problem if the Forest Service, now that they recognize that the white paper is for everywhere, all forests, not just owl habitat?
Yeah, but I'm just saying the prescription right now is inconsistent with the white paper because it doesn't say,
right,
kind of because it relies on basal area versus canopy. So I'm just trying to understand how we're gonna not box the owls in to certain areas within the LSR. How we're not gonna keep some of those bigger. Maybe right now they're 26 inches, and so they would go away, but eventually they would be, maybe something conducive to owl habitat. I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question.
Okay. So I think I understand that you're not talking about the areas that are habitat now. It's the areas that are either non-habitat or dispersal that the FMZ treatments can reduce those basal areas to 60 to 80 in the inner zone. So.
And that would just be in the FMZ only, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that is just FMZ. That's not the forest. The forest resilience has a much higher basal area retention level, even in the non-habitat and dispersal.
That's 140 to 180, correct? But yeah.
Okay. I mean, I understand what you're getting at. I think the goal was to try to be, try to make these FMZs as effective as possible, given all of the sideboards, that, if we're in owl habitat, we have, pretty high retention levels. And if we're outside of habitat, we have an opportunity to make a more effective FMZ. That's the way I see it. So trying to balance that, reducing the risk to the communities, to the residual green forest, and, you know, trying to balance the, you know, maintaining habitat, you know, now for the owls that are living there.
I understand that. I mean, I'm a fire person too, so I understand. I'm just wondering why, I love fuel breaks. I just am trying to understand the value of designating something LSR if there's not any difference in the prescription for inside an LSR versus outside for the non-owl, where the owls aren't right now.
Yep.
That's it. Yeah.
And I'm sure we probably have that acreage amount of these LSR areas that are outside of current NSO habitat. I mean, it could be, I know that we have that number somewhere, I just don't have it in front of me, but we could look at that and see how much of an area we're talking about with this.
We got
if that would be helpful.
We got 3,464 acres of owl habitat right now. But there's a lot more that's outside owl habitat, but still within the LSR. Yeah.
Right.
Larry.
Yeah, so I wanted to drill down once again on the diameter limit that you guys have. So by my math, and I admit I'm not a math whiz, but my calculation is nearly 80% of the trees on site are below 20 inches, and about 12.5 or over 12.5% are over 20 inches. So you don't have a whole lot of big trees on site. So it seems to me that your diameter limit at 30 is too high. You need to bring it back down to 20 to 24, leaving more of the big trees behind, because there's not that many big trees on the site. And big trees are definitely what we want as a desired future condition left behind.
Can you speak to that, or?
I mean, the prescriptions retain the largest, healthiest trees. So, you know, it's not that we're going to cut everything under 30 inches. That's certainly not the case. We're going to start with the small ones and retain the largest, healthiest, you know, best shade producing trees. So,
yeah, this is Tom Wall.
Written.
Can I jump in a little bit on selecting which trees are going to be harvested? Because everybody's confusing the idea of what the canopy cover was going to be or look like. And a large 35-inch pine tree that has 5 green needles on it is not what we were expecting to leave on the landscape under that white paper. So there was no diameter limit. There was no basal area. There was no canopy construction, because we were trying to describe a canopy closed, well shaded with healthy, bigger trees, but not necessarily the biggest trees if the biggest trees didn't have any canopy. So even your 30-inch limit really doesn't meet the white paper objective, because we're looking at which kind of trees do we want on the landscape. And that's really the objective here. I agree that we want to leave those 26 and 28 inches. If the average diameter is only 20, you want bigger trees left, but they have to be healthy trees. So that's why I really don't want to say leave all the trees bigger than 24 or whatever, something like that, because that's not what we're looking for. We're trying to describe that canopy that covers and provides shade, minimizes fuel, brush growth, so that we can run prescribed fire through there in the future and everything else like that. So hopefully that describes what we're trying to do, and we don't get caught up in what size tree or anything else. Think of that as that healthiest tree that's going to provide shade for the longest period of time.
I fully agree with Tom, but unfortunately, I'm trying to speak the Forest Service's language because they don't seem to understand our original intent. But I agree totally with what Tom said. I'm just trying to translate it to something that the Forest Service seems to want to use in the field, and that's diameter limits.
And I think you guys did a really good job, Larry and Tom, painting that picture of, regardless of size of tree, we want to keep the healthiest trees out there with the best canopy to provide that shading and grow to that mature status in the future. If, like you said, if it's a 35-inch tree and it's on its last leg, we're not going to keep that one because um, there's no shade structure there. So I think just having this conversation with you guys really helps, us digest the picture you guys are painting for us in relation to the white paper and how the Forest Service has historically thought about all this stuff. So I like how you guys are keeping it in simple terms to paint the picture for us.
Ren's had his hand up for a long time.
Yep, I was going to mention we've had a couple people that have jumped on since our introductions earlier. Monique Ray with the Shasta Trinity National Forest, and Ren Winter with Corral Creek and Trinity River Lumber Company. Ren, yes, you had your hand up for quite a while, so go ahead.
Thanks, Kelly. Originally, I wanted to respond to some of Carol's comments just to try to provide some clarification in LSR prescription versus non-LSR prescription. All of the Forest Service's prescriptions are, I mean, in general, all of these prescriptions are designed and they're when looking at it from a forestry perspective, they are designed to create older, more resilient forests or forests that can become older and more resilient, regardless of the land use allocation. And land use allocation being late successional reserve, matrix, riparian reserve, whatever it might be. So your comments about why these prescriptions don't differ within LSRs, where the LSR objective is to create older forests, it's because that it seems to me like the Forest Service they're trying to make all forests older regardless of if it's matrix or LSR with these prescriptions. They're trying to make more resilient forests that can become older, I should say. Within LSRs, the main objective is to create old late successional stands, but in my opinion, that's not appropriate everywhere. When you look at a blanket approach like LSRs were when they were delineated on maps, LSRs were drawn across brush fields, they were drawn across oak woodlands, they were drawn across pine oak woodlands. What that is essentially meaning is that we would need to convert those oak woodlands into a late successional characteristic, regardless of if that's the best thing to do in today's climate and today's fire regimes. So there's a little bit of I don't necessarily agree with the LSR's overarching guidelines to create late successional characteristics everywhere within that LSR, because I view it more as I wish there was more site specific variability that we could say, okay, this is an oak woodland. We don't want to manage this to become a true fir conifer stand because it's not appropriate for this site. So we need to reduce the basal area here lower. We need to be able to reduce the basal area here lower. Also within LSRs, fuel breaks are allowed when they are defending like the greater portion of the LSR. So just because one fuel break may have, just because the FMZs have slightly different prescriptions than the forest resilience or whatever the other prescription is called. LSRs, the guidelines do allow for that. I can't, there may be some, it almost seems like there may be some confusion between what the Forest Service defines as non-habitat for NSOs versus areas that are outside of a spotted owl's 1.3 mile radius core. And the areas that the Forest Service defines as non-habitat should, as if they're defined correctly, should be less than 80 square feet of basal area. So the comments about the whole project as a whole having 400 some odd square feet of basal area, and that these non-habitat areas are going to be cut down to 60, and that there's going to be an 80% reduction in basal area, it just simply is impossible, because if non-habitat, if a stand has 400 square feet of basal area, that would be delineated as nesting roosting habitat, not non-habitat. I just wanted to make some clarifications of things that seemed to me like we were kind of talking in two different directions there.
Real quick, just one of the other things that I noted from our field tour had to do with how much, I guess, decision making that the actual operators are using under designation by description, which seems to be how a lot of this, how these projects are moving forward. And what I would wonder is, how does designation by description like equate to an understanding of what that desired condition is as designated by our guidance paper?
I thought it was designated by prescription is what they're using.
Okay, I could be incorrect, but I mean, I guess, and I'm still honestly, like, that's my own ignorance, I guess, but between the two, designation by prescription and designation by description, like if they're using D by P, how is that relating to, what we're defining as a desired condition based on our white paper? And I think that's just a general question, I guess, for the group, if anybody wants to jump in on that, because I don't know that what we're seeing in the field is matching up. And I'm wondering how much of that confusion is actually at the operator level.
And the sale administrator.
And the sale administrator.
I can attempt to provide an answer, hearing that no one else is speaking up. To me, what I took from our field trip to Rainier and Long Canyon was the biggest discrepancy between what we as the collaborative are trying to accomplish with the white paper and what what was done on the ground was within the non-habitat units. That seemed to me to be the most clear areas that there was a difference between, well, this is we can easily say that that what they did in the non-habitat areas is stretching the boundaries of what our intent of the white paper was. Now within I think as far as D by P goes, looking at the prescription for those non-habitat areas, which I believe was the third stop, the 7 stump area, it seemed to me that the operator met what the Forest Service's prescription was there of 60 to 80 square feet of basal area. But to me, it feels like the prescription there was not adequate for the site, for that stand. It should have had, I mean, the Forest Service should have done their due diligence and stood at that unit and said, okay, 60 to 80 square feet of basal area isn't appropriate in this unit. We should leave more. As far as, I mean, I didn't come away from that field trip thinking that the majority of the project area, I didn't come away from the field trip thinking that there was a consensus of the collaborative that a majority of the project area was, as a whole, and talking about Rainier specifically, was drastically outside of the scope of the white paper. It seemed like once Zane described the reason why and how operators are making decisions on what trees to cut, that it seemed to me, at least, and maybe I'm completely in left field here, but it seemed to me that there was some level of understanding for a significant portion of the project area, and to me that seemed like it was the areas that were defined as foraging habitat, and the areas that were defined as nesting roosting habitat. So I mean, to me, it seemed like the operator was meeting the prescription that they were provided. And to me, in my opinion here, but to me, the foraging and nesting roosting areas generally met the white paper's prescription or the white paper's guidelines.
Larry.
Well, yes and no, Ren. I think that the operator did do what was described to them, but our point was that's not what the white paper says. And what was admitted on the scene was that there was this misunderstanding that that the white paper didn't apply to non-habitat areas, and it always was intended to apply to those areas. And just because it's not habitat, we want the same shade characteristics there as we would like in the habitat areas. Maybe not as much shade, but still shade. And those areas were down to, I would describe them as down to 20% canopy. That's all that's going to do is turn into a brush field, in my opinion. But I agree with you. The operator had lots of legitimate reasons why they did what they did, but that doesn't, the outcome was still bad. And I think the planning should address that so that those kinds of situations don't happen again.
Yep.
Carol.
So I know we have a hard stop at 10, so can I just ask a couple questions about the prescribed fire part? Or Jerry, do you want to go ahead?
Just a real quick one. I really wanted to understand the protocols. So we have the operator, there's a sale administrator, and there's a contract officer. So the contract officer comes before before the work happens, and then the contract officer identifies what is to happen that the operator is supposed to do, and the sale administrator then is on site ensuring that the operator is doing what the contract says. Do I have that set up right?
Yeah, that's correct, Jerry.
Okay, so then the contract officer is the one who would incorporate the information from the white paper and community input and the collaborative input. And that would be part of the contract that the sale administrator would be monitoring in the field.
So the contract, the NEPA would take into account the white paper. The contracting officer pulls the specifications from the NEPA and the desired objective. So it has to be listed in that first NEPA document. Then that's where the sale admin team builds their project. They pull the specifications from the NEPA, provide them to the contracting officer. That person builds the logging plan, all that stuff out,
Okay.
and then the sale admin person is the guy that's on the ground ensuring that the specifications are met.
Okay, so then that just adds one other level. And the way I see it is that the NEPA person who does the NEPA has to be aware of the white paper to incorporate that into the NEPA document, which then goes to the contract officer.
That would be how the plan is built, because if you don't put it into the NEPA, then there's no real way to ensure that that's going to be followed. So
Okay,
it has to be written in. If the desire is to meet the intent of the white paper, then the specifications in the NEPA should address that.
Maybe Tim can stay.
For canopy
Great.
closure, for basal area, for all of that.
Right. All right. Thanks for that clarification. So we need to have connections with the NEPA person early on. So thank you for that, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Carol.
Okay, so the prescribed fire treatment F. So it says there are areas where it's, too steep, too heavy a fuel load for mechanized treatment. It's too unsafe for hand piling and burning. So you're just gonna burn it. And so you're not going to do any fuel reduction before the prescribed burns?
So that's going to be, again, more of a site specific area. There are certainly areas within our forest, within the prescriptions for prescribed burning, that we can burn without a pretreatment, right? I know that it's hard to visualize that, but many times slowly backing fire through a landscape, allowing fire in that instance to act like natural fire, where it selects what it's going to leave behind and selects what mortality level that we can do that. And many areas of the Weaverville Community Forest, and I get a little bit different fuel type, but many of those areas, there's been no pretreatment other than the control lines. And so I believe the majority of the area will have some form of pretreatment, but there will be spots where it's just not feasible to do the manual treatment because of the slopes, where we're gonna have to backfire through there to the control locations. In those spots, we will emphasize probably some additional pre-treatment along those control lines to make sure that we have good, strong holding features.
So can you put that in NEPA that you've got, some more detail on how you're going to do this? Because the NEPA document, the EA, is pretty vague. And so, I look at map C, which is, the Covington Mill area by Bob. And there's a lot, just south of my property there, and this is a concern my neighbors. They were going to write a letter tomorrow, but now they're going to wait till I get them some more information. But there's a ridgetop fuel break that, how do you even access it? There's no roads, so you're relying on putting in these fuel breaks to break up these prescribed fire areas, but you can't access it so like the prescribed fire says it's too steep or it's too dangerous. So, but you're going to put in a fuel break and then you're going to burn around it. And some of it's where there's, you're going to burn without a fuel break next to a community.
Yep.
Okay, just letting you know, I'm kind of worried about that. I trust you.
Again,
you're not allowed to retire.
There's control. So a fuel break and control lines are not the same thing.
Right.
And we've done that in the past. The challenge of, if you get very prescriptive with prescribed fire in the NEPA, then it locks you into corners with implementation of prescribed fire that may not may not achieve the objectives, or may make it so hard to implement the prescribed fire that you can't do it. Right. So it's so I would always caution, because if you say you got to do this, well, then maybe the whole landscape now is required to do that because of a statement that gets put into NEPA, and it's not always needed in that spot. So I would just caution against being too prescriptive. Right. Talk about the desired objectives and and what you want to get out of it, instead of this is the step-by-step process to get there with prescribed fire.
But, there's like a forest resilience area and then a prescribed fire and then a fuel management zone. So, I mean, with the access issues, why don't you expand the forest resilience area or something? I just don't understand that. Maybe we can talk about that later. We've got more time now, but I just looking at the map, there's just so many orange plots adjacent to homes, where you've got essentially fuel management zones around an out parcel, and then the person's home is in the middle. And I just don't get that. Sorry, you got more questions.
I mean, we're pretty much at time, so I guess this is kind of up to Ben and the team. There's a couple more questions. Do we have time for those questions?
Yeah, if we have a couple more quick questions, we can take them before we close out.
Just real quick, Tim, you're still talking about putting control lines in?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not I mean, if it's the lakeshore, we're not going to put a control line on the lakeshore. But if it's the edge of the prescribed fire unit boundary, we're absolutely going to have control lines, and we may do a 50 or 100-foot buffer off of there for prep, where we cut and pile and burn the first year, so we create that buffer. But we're not trying to make the shaded fuel break in that spot.
Okay, and Jerry?
Mine's just a comment on Tim's words. You don't want to be too prescriptive on how things are stated, and that was precisely the headspace we were at with the white paper. We did not want to put people in boxes. So, and that then opens up lots of possibilities. So I think this conversation today was very beneficial, so that people understand what the intent was. Thanks.
Yeah. And then maybe, Tim, you could just touch on the nexus between the NEPA document and then the actual burn plan that has the prescriptions of that actual burn for that unit. Maybe that'll help folks understand, why we keep stuff vague in the NEPA document.
Yeah, similar to what I was just talking about, that the NEPA gives a desired condition, and it talks about the areas where this tool may be employed. Because fire is not a mechanical treatment, right? Like, it takes time to get there. It may take 3, 4, 5 treatments, and I believe it says that in the NEPA. It might take 15 to 20 years of initial entry at a lower level on the prescription to start, knocking back some of the surface fuels, to the second entry that's a little bit warmer, that starts taking out some of the ladder fuels and some of the canopy to achieve spacing, those smaller diameter fuels. So it takes time. And if you say you're gonna do this with one entry of prescribed fire, it just doesn't work very often, right? You may be successful in grass, but it doesn't work that way in timber. Like, it just takes time to get there. So describing the end state and what your objectives are for the burn in the NEPA is great, because then it allows the tool to process over time to get to that desired end state. Knowing that there's maintenance burning, there's pockets. It may be a wet year and those north slopes don't want to burn, but the south slope will burn really well in this certain window, or vice versa, where it's a drier year and we just want to try to get the north slopes treated. And so it's some experience in the burn boss and the firing crew, but also fire is not a scalpel. It's kind of a broadsword, and it, so it's the process of getting there.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for the good of the order at this stage?
So
Kelly, real quick, what was in the chat? What's in the chat?
It was just a comment from Monique stating,
okay,
yes, she was sitting in to listen.
One last question. Is there any mechanism then for the Forest Service to kind of come back and show us whatever changes or adaptations have been made based on this conversation so we can see that?
Without having to read the whole document.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I hope that you guys would read the final EA and the decision document. But yeah, there'll be a way of kind of tracking any changes that happened to the EA that went out for preliminary review to what the final will be. So
okay.
yeah, and I will make sure that that is communicated clearly to everybody where changes have been made.
Great.
Yeah, and
How does the comments here get incorporated into the comments that are in the portal on Pinion, where you have the letters and all that stuff? How do we incorporate this conversation?
This would be, I mean, that's a good question. Because this is definitely a meeting that's happening during the public comment period. I'm going to take notes and I'm going to have those notes. We would still encourage anyone who wants to, make comments during this time.
Description of it.
So, yeah, I'm getting little whispers on this side, and I'm going to confirm that what we'll do, at least with this meeting, so that nothing gets lost, we'll have this recording up on the collaborative website, and I can do that later today even. And if it's helpful, we could have it transcribed and in a format that then can be distributed to their group.
Put on the website.
And put on the website.
I can keep Kelly updated too.
Okay.
So, and Kelly, as we move through the rest of the comment period here until early June, as we share these comments, this feedback with the IDT and the supervisor's office staff, like Kelly McElroy and her staff, Kelly, I can keep you updated on the progress, and you can keep the collaborative updated. And if for some reason we feel like we want to do another Zoom meeting mid-June or early June, we can set that up. But I think between you and I, Kelly, we should stay in communication through the open comment period, and just to make sure that you guys are being heard.
Okay.
Great.
So
one last.
This is Pat. So I want to let Callan and Ben know that you're probably still going to get letters before you have made changes, because just so the timing of the comment period ends June 5th. So for example, my community service district board meeting is this Thursday, and it won't meet again until after the close of the comment period. So please just recognize that we're going to probably send you comments that talk about these same things that we talked about today, even though we're anticipating that you'll make changes to the document to incorporate some of those changes.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Great. And that sounds great, Ben. Yeah, we can share out, as things are developing, and I have no problem with that. Just let me know what you need.
Okay. Yep.
Great. Oh, well, unless there's anything else, are we at the point of
where no return?
Calling it a day?
I think we're in a good spot. Kelly. I just wanted to say I really appreciate working with you to find a date and time, and really appreciate everybody from the collaborative group jumping on and not only sharing your feedback and your thoughts on this project, but you know, it seemed like everybody read the document for this little meeting. So really appreciate you guys diving into the document, and super happy to see the engagement between the group and the Shasta Lake staff, just because of the geographical distance and not really having that tie to Trinity County. But just really thankful that you guys were able to, you know, be there and provide that feedback to the Shasta Lake staff, the planning team here, and get them kind of up to speed on, you know, sort of how what Trinity County is looking for, especially, you know, along with the collaborative in for projects that are occurring on the landscape in Trinity County. So I really appreciate you guys helping out and just sharing that, you know, good, honest feedback.
Wonderful. Well, if that's the good order, we'll call this adjourned. Thank you all so much for being on here and engaging in this discussion too, on the agency side. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.